for doing the bleach. I'm like,
Hey, Sydney and Savannah. We're just picking up the last few pieces of lab here.
Sea star guts.
Sea star guts, squid guts.
all the guys.
Everybody will be here in 1 second. They're all getting their take-home sea urchins to go. You got them? Awesome. Well, you dropped a glove. Yeah. Can you? Okay. You're gonna want that. Believe me. There you go. Can you see that tonight? It's gonna take a little time. Hey, Cole and Michael, you need to get your
Sea
station.
star guts.
You need to get it all put back in that Ziploc bag here.
Sea star
It's
guts.
still sticking up everything. There you go. Hey, you got it all in here, right?
I forgot about that.
All right, can you take a minute, pick that up? There you go. And I'll deal with all the rest of this after.
Haley.
All right, 2 minutes, you guys, to get over here. Those of you who are doing whatever. Let me see what I can pass out. Don't forget to take your apron off and hang it on that doorknob. People have been known to wear aprons and goggles out the door because they're just not thinking about it. So it happens.
You ever did it on work?
Cole, Jack, and Jack. Oh, Jack gets Jack and Jack. Where's Jack? You're the only one who bothered to color anything, so therefore you win.
I want to call it color. I call no artistic talent. Just drawing a little bit on paper, and I got candy. I know. I do it really for the glory, so I can
Okay.
show my sisters that I did something art and I won.
What's mine?
But what
Return to paper to you.
that,
Okay, so why don't we go ahead and start because Sydney's already waiting and we're 4 minutes in. So Michael, Cole, if you guys want to stand there and put your stuff in the little baggie, that's fine. You can do that while I start. So we're still doing our invertebrate to primate. And you guys, as I said, your lessons get a little more in-depth into systems and things like that. And then theirs is going group of animal by group of animal. So we're adding that onto yours to make sure that all of our labs made sense. So today we did some mollusks and some echinoderms. We didn't do any arthropods, but if you noticed on the table over there, I had some specimens out. Did anybody see what was over there on the table? Specimen wise, what would we see?
there was a butterfly.
There was a butterfly and there was also a cicada exoskeleton. You know how they leave it behind? And there was also a, in one of the little tiny containers, there was a piece of carpenter bee bread. Bees make this bread called bread, and they stuff it down in the tubes they make for their larvae to feed on. So there was a little bit that I got when we took the deck apart. So that was kind of cool. So I hung on to that. All right, so let's see what we have today. This was your homework. We'll go over it quickly. So why is it better to classify animals as chordates or non-chordates rather than vertebrates or invertebrates?
Because
You can do it.
Are invertebrate chordates.
There are invertebrate chordates. What's an example of one?
Cartilaginous fish.
Yes, cartilaginous fish. Great. Like what?
Shark, rays.
Shark, skates, rays. Those are your main ones, right? Excellent. That's exactly why. All right. So what is an example of an animal that possesses bilateral symmetry?
Mountain goat.
Mountain goat. Who else has one?
Human.
Human?
I think I just put a regular goat.
Regular goat. A regular goat. Right. So there's lots of examples. You guys have lots of examples. How about radial symmetry?
Sea star guts.
Sea the guts. What else? Sea urchins, right? Things like that. All right. And then how about no body symmetry? That's the easy one. Sponges, right? Very good. Okay. So into which body systems do cells of the endoderm, mesoderm, and ectoderm differentiate? Does anybody remember?
The ectoderm is the nervous system.
Okay, good.
The endoderm is like all your organs and stuff.
Okay, anybody
And
else?
the mesoderm is
He's getting there. James is doing pretty good. So yeah, so your endoderm is your organs and Among them, like your colon, stomach, intestines, lungs, liver, pancreas, your mesoderm. This is the rise that does muscles, skeletal muscles, smooth muscle, blood vessels, bone, cartilage, connective tissue, endocrine glands, kidneys, cord, all this good stuff, heart muscle. And your ectoderm is your neural tissue, spinal cord, peripheral nerves and brain, skin, lining of the mouth, anus, nostrils, sweat glands, hair, nail, all that kind of stuff. Tooth enamel. Very good. All right, so we're going to talk a little bit about invertebrate evolution and diversity. And then at the end, we'll get into our mollusks, arthropods, echinoderms. So invertebrate evolution and diversity. So what are the origins of invertebrates? So we go back 3. Hey guys over there, Claire and whoever else is over there. Who else is over there? I don't know. Oh, Anthony, lower your voices, okay? Lily, there you go. So 3 billion years ago, prokaryotes and eukaryotes were single-celled. Okay, here we are again. What's a prokaryote?
It says cell without
No membrane-bound.
No membrane-bound nucleus. What's a eukaryote?
and organelles.
I'll give him a second.
Everything else.
Everything else, right? Okay, hold on one second. I want to make sure this crew over here keeps it down. All right.
I have several wing for me at home. I have that wing for me at home. I'm very excited.
See, startups.
All right. Olivia, thank you. Now I'm back. All right. So yes. And then what happened after that? They started single-celled. So then animals are going to evolve from ancestors they shared with organisms called, anybody want to go?
Flagellate.
There you go. You got it. All right. So these are what they think are probably the predecessor organisms as we move into multicellular animals. So we have traces of animals and the Cambrian explosion. So now we're getting back into this fossil stuff. Oh, Ethan, we're here into stuff you like, aren't we, Ethan? Ethan loves dinosaur stuff. So you still like the dinosaur stuff?
Yeah.
All right. So our first animals were these tiny, soft-bodied, so we don't have a lot of fossils of them because they're little soft-bodied things. They don't leave a lot behind. And then after that, we move into larger animals that get more complex, they get specialized cells, and those cells join together to make tissues, then organ systems. We know this, right? Tissue cells compose tissues, tissues compose organs, organs compose systems. And those work together to carry out all these more complex functions. So we get trace fossils. What are trace fossils? Those are things like tracks left behind, like a footprint, and burrows made by many animals whose body parts weren't fossilized. So we don't have the body part of the animal, but we have a trace fossil. So this great example is a dinosaur leaves a footprint or an organism leaves a mark where it was, and that fills in and becomes rock. And over time, you can see that there was a footprint here, but we don't have the organism itself. So fossils from the Cambrian period date back to roughly 565 to 545 million years ago. So they show little evidence of cell, tissue, or organ specialization. No organism into a front and back end. Remember last week we talked about front, anterior, and posterior ends. Where's your posterior end? That's right. It's your rump, not your feet, right? Because you're a tetrapod, but you're bipedal, which makes you weird. If you were quadrupedal and walked on 4 legs, it would be pretty obvious where your back end is. So they also were fairly flat, and they lived on the bottom of the seas. Pretty much everything starts in water, right? Okay. Cole, will you go over there, please, since you're standing, and just tell them, last reminder to be quiet before I have to tell them they're on silence, which is not going to be fun. All right. So everything starts in the ocean, right? Or in the seas, because it's so easy to absorb nutrients from the water around you. You can absorb oxygen through gills. All that kind of stuff is way easier than trying to hunt for food on land. Also, if they're doing external fertilization, you've got water to carry gametes around. And if you're doing internal fertilization, even if you lay eggs, those eggs can stay in the water and they're safe there, as opposed to putting them on land where they're going to dry out. So these fossils show that over a period of millions of years, animals evolved complex body parts, special cells, tissues, organs. Some had body symmetry, segmentation, a front and back end, and appendages. So we're getting much more complex as we move on. So I love this picture. This is a really cool critter. So what is the modern invertebrate diversity? So now we're talking much more today. So all invertebrates except sponges exhibit some type of body symmetry, either radial or bilateral. So remember, sponges are our odd man out. And that's easy to remember because there's only one, right? These are the guys with no symmetry at all. They're funky shaped. So invertebrates with cephalization, what cephalization?
It's separate. It's like a specific front and back, and
It's the head, basically, right? And it's the placement of all your sensory organs, or primarily most of your sensory organs, in a head region. Did we see cephalization in either of our samples today?
yes.
Which one? The squid, correct. Did the sea star have any cephalization going on? No, not really, but the squid had sense organs in its head. What were you to look for in its head that was a sense organ?
Eyeball.
Its eyes, right? And they're big
Yeah.
for the size of that critter, right?
able to get the
Saw
lens
James
out.
stick something in an eye hole and twirl it around.
Awesome, James.
I got the lens. out.
And pull something
Get the
out.
lens out. That's really good. Yeah. So sometimes you do in lab, you could do like sheep eyes. If you do biology in college, you might get the opportunity to do sheep eyes. And they've been preserved so well that they're very bouncy. Some people have been known to, bounce them on the table. But yeah, and you can really, they're much bigger. So you can dissect that eye and you can really see the iris, the lens, the cornea, the aqueous humor, the retina. It's all really visible because they're much bigger. In these guys, they weren't quite as visible. Plus mine was a little kind of pasty inside, but you could see them for sure. It was pretty neat. So when you get cephalization in your invertebrates, they can start to respond to their environment. And that's because now they have all their sensory organs located at their front end. And remember, it's the front end because when they're moving, why do they need them all at the front?
That's the way they're going.
Yeah, whatever they're going to counter is going to be in front of them. So that's why your sensory organs are all at your anterior end. So you got worms, arthropods, mollusks. These are all protostomes. And echinoderms are deuterostomes. Do you remember what protostomes and deuterostomes meant? So this has to do with the gastrulation process in an embryo. When it starts to bend in, it starts to form an alimentary canal, and you've got two holes that are going to break open. One's going to turn into a mouth, one's going to turn into an anus, right? Whichever one opens first determines whether it's a protostome or a deuterostome. So if the mouth is the part that opens first in that canal, that's a protostome. If the anus is the part that opens first, that's a deuterostome. So you've got protostomes and deuterostomes. We're deuterostomes. So here is your, what is this? What do we call this thing? Can you see this diagram? It's a cladogram, right? Okay. So this cladogram is going to show our non-chordate invertebrate evolution, right? And remember, this is great because it shows where they branch off. So you can see right here, oh, there's our little platyhelminths. They were so cute. And then you get your roundworms up here, and then your mollusks are going to come to here. And then what happens? Your arthropods and your annelids are going to come off of this mollusk. So what are annelids? Yeah, earthworms is an example. Segmented worms, right? Remember, the roundworms are not segmented. Remember that earthworm last week had clear segments. So these are segmented worms. And then we have our arthropods over here. And we'll talk about them in a minute. And then your echinoderms kind of pop up way over here. So a little different than what you might envision if you're trying to do it on your own. So the cladogram of non-chordate invertebrates presents current hypotheses. Remember, these are always hypotheses about evolutionary relationships. That's what they are. So these features include body symmetry, cephalization, segmentation, formation of a coelom. Do you remember what a coelom is? It's like an internal body cavity, right? Some animals are coelomates, some animals are acoelomates. So right here is where you have your coelom development. So you might think that your roundworms and your annelids would be pretty closely related because they're worms. But if you think about how they actually develop, your roundworms have a body cavity. When you cut your roundworm open, your annelids have a body cavity. When you cut your annelid open last week, you could clearly see it had a body cavity, right? Had a center body cavity. Well, so do mollusks, as you saw today. And so do arthropods, if you were to cut open an arthropod, which is really difficult to dissect because they're kind of crunchy. However, I have done grasshoppers before. They're itty bitty, but they get these big ones for labs. They grow them real big. And because they put them in preservative, their exoskeleton is a little more flexible, so you can actually kind of cut them open and pin them down like you did today with these guys. But they're teeny tiny. All right, so then let's talk about chordate evolution and diversity. Do you know what that guy is? Yeah, he's a manta ray. Aren't they beautiful? So cool. So here's your origins of chordates and your earliest chordates. So this dude right here, I did my best to put some species names down at the bottom for some of these guys for you. So chordates are the animals we know best because they are generally large, often conspicuous, strike us as beautiful, impressive, cute, frightening. These are the, oh, look at a cute koala bear, right? Which are really, you guys, have you seen the video of the koala that gets kicked out of the tree? I'll have to show you if we have time. They look so flippin' cute. They are mean. So
Yeah.
there's one, this poor koala gets kicked out of a tree. He's clearly being bullied. It's actually kind of a hysterical video. You feel bad for him, but it's hysterical at the same time. So we keep some of them as pets. Others we eat as protein. Have you seen the little, it's a meme. I've seen it as a billboard once too, but it has all these animals in a row. And it talks about like what you would eat if you were in apocalyptic times. And it's like, it's got like chicken and stuff at one end. And it's like every day of the week. And then it gets like to dogs and cats and thing. And then it gets to like horses. And it's, you know, it's like, this is apocalyptic. We would only eat these. Yeah, but I mean, it's a lot of it's cultural because we don't typically eat a lot of goat here, but there are some places in the world where goat is super popular and they don't eat cow, you know? So a lot of it's cultural, and then a lot of it just, we don't generally, as humans, eat. Anybody ever had frog legs, by the way? I used to really like them when I was a little kid, but I haven't had them in many, many years. But they fry them up, and they do kind of taste like chicken. They're big legs, but yeah.
Everything tastes like chicken.
Everything tastes like chicken, man. That's right. If you just tell yourself it tastes like chicken, except I will tell you, snapping turtle is not. I was fed snapping turtle without my knowledge once. It was not good. Somebody told me it was chicken. It was not chicken.
I've had snake once.
Yeah.
Pretty good.
I had snake too, but I thought it was really greasy.
It was fun. It was, for me, it was really, really chewy.
Yeah, we had it in China at the what they call the what do they call it? The night market. Yeah, it's where they cook like the silkworm larva and the scorpions and snakes and grasshoppers, and they serve them on sticks, all the weird stuff. We went and we tried a piece of bread and it was just and a snake, which was not amazing. I didn't think so. So embryological studies suggest that the most ancient chordates were related to the ancestors of echinoderms. So it's not maybe what you would expect, but that's the way it goes. And remember, the echinoderms, the cool thing about them is that water vascular system that the sea stars have. Like they pull that water in and they use it like we use muscles. They use it to put more pressure here, almost like a plant does, right? More pressure here, more pressure there, and they move around with it. It's really, really neat. So in 1999, so long ago for you guys, fossil beds from later in the Cambrian period yielded specimens of, I am not going to try this guy, maybe I will, Mylocomyngia. I don't know that one. It's the earliest known vertebrate and is similar to this guy here. So cartilage is a strong connective tissue, softer and more flexible than bone. Where do you have cartilage? Your nose, your ears, where else do you have it?
The ribs.
You have it in pretty much all of your joints, right? It's at the top of all your bones. It's the part that helps you move your bones and not grind them together, right? So a lot of these guys that were the earliest known vertebrates had like their backbone was starting to calcify and become what we know as bone, and so was their jaw, but the rest of their skeleton was kind of moving from cartilage into that. So we started with cartilage, right? So modern chordate diversity. So modern chordates are very diverse, and we can put them into 6 groups. Okay, now we're not going to call these clades. We're not going to call these phyla. They're not necessarily this way, but these are sort of like the loose groups, because if you start getting into the actual taxonomy, it gets super, super complicated. So we'll say we got non-vertebrate chordates. So these are the guys we talked about before, sharks, skates, and rays. And then we have 5 groups of vertebrates. So the fish, amphibians, reptiles, birds, and mammals. And that's kind of how we, did he try and eat your Jill?
He just walked over there and he started panking and he walked away.
He's so weird. Otto's worse. Otto does the drive-by lick. Like you'll be sitting there minding your own business and he will come up like lick you and run away or bump you and run away. It's really weird. So that's kind of how we're going to look at them over the next few weeks. So about 96% of all modern chordate species are vertebrates. So there's only about 4% that fall into that Chondrichthyes group. So among your vertebrates, our fishes are the largest group by far, fishes, because there's more water on the planet than dirt, land. So you get a huge, huge variety of fish. And so fish are our osteichthyes, by the way, when we get into them. So here's your cladogram of chordates. You got your non-vertebrate chordates. I'm not even sure what they're trying to call that. I don't know what that's supposed to be. Yep. So you got fishes, amphibians, reptiles, and birds, and then mammals. Why do you suppose reptiles and birds look like this?
Because birds are reptiles.
Birds are basically modern day dinosaurs, right? Those that survived.
I think they're actually supposed to be called avian reptiles.
Yep. So those that survived either remained reptiles like the ones we see today, your alligators, and even your little, like I have a little anole in there in that little box. If anybody noticed him, he hides well. Or they evolved into birds. So like what are some of the later, I'm sure Ethan knows this one. What are some of the later fossils that show the evidence of evolution into birds?
What do you mean?
Like the
How about
that
dinosaurs
decided
suddenly
to
have
change-
feathers?
Oh
Yeah,
yeah,
there
no,
it is.
most of them don't suddenly have feathers. It's
Mhm.
actually it's like a large misconception that most of them
Mhm.
are scaly. They were primarily scaly, but a lot of them have feathers because they're very, very closely related to birds. Most of them are just giant chickens.
Yeah, pretty much giant chickens. I mean, especially the big predatorial ones that have the bird hips, like their hips
Yeah.
are not out to the side, their
Right.
hips are underneath.
Most predatory dinosaurs, especially in the late Cretaceous period, like velociraptors and Tyrannosaurus Rex, typically had feathers and or like
Mhm.
more beak shaped like
Yeah.
faces, I guess.
And then you get into ones like Archaeopteryx, which is
Yeah,
like
but
kind of your
those-
first
those
birdish.
were
Yeah.
those were actually earlier than
Hmm.
those were mid-Jurassic period.
And they kind of moved out this direction on their own, like on a cladogram. So yeah, it's interesting to see how that works. So you got your cladogram of chordates. Remember, these are always hypotheses. This is how we think it went. And we're looking at things like jaws and limbs. So again, amphibian limbs and actually reptile limbs are not that different. And then these birds start to get these kind of different limbs, right? And then you got your mammals kind of coming up from down here on their own. So our non-vertebrate chordates, I love chondrichthyes. The tunicates and lancets are one type. This is one of these guys. So these are these little non-vertebrate chordates. They're not very big. They look more like sponges than what you would think of as other chordates. So that's probably what that other one in the picture was supposed to be, is a tunicate. I'm not even sure what that thing was, but so they have neither a notochord or tail, but their larval forms have key chordate characteristics. Then we have agnathans. I love agnathans. These are so fun. So these are lampreys and hagfishes. They lack vertebra, but they have notochords as adults. Do you know what these guys look like?
Fish are so cute.
Eels.
Yeah, they look kind of like eels, and they have these mouths. So agnathans are like, we call them jawless fish. So they have a mouth, but it's not a jaw like we think of as a jaw. It's like a circular, yeah, it's like a circular thing full of teeth. They're cool looking, like they're gross and cool looking at the same time. So lamprey are filter feeders as larva parasites and as adults. Okay, and then hagfishes have this pinkish gray worm-like body. They secrete incredible amounts of slime, and they can literally tie their bodies into knots. They're very slimy. And then lastly is chondrichthyes, and you guys know these. They have jaws that have teeth, and they have muscles, make it possible to bite, chew plants and other animals, but really mostly animals. And then, yeah, some of these don't have like actual connecting words in them. They're just sort of brief summary. Yeah, they're missing things like articles, but that's the point of them. They're not complete sentences. So then they got fins attached to their limb girdles. Okay, so we all have limb girdles. That's kind of like our pelvis is a great example of a girdle that your limbs attached to. And your shoulders have a girdle too. It's a little harder to visualize maybe. And then, so you have fins attached to limb girdles, which are supporting structures made of cartilage or bone. So when you think of sharks, they've got all these teeth, they've got these, kind of bony jaws, but they've got still a cartilaginous skeleton, and skates and rays too. So these adaptations launch the adaptive radiation of the class Chondrichthyes. Sharks, skates, rays is primarily what we think of. So then we get into osteichthyes. These are our bony fishes. Aren't they cute? And we'll be talking a lot about them next week too. So our bony fishes, these are ancient, the ancient fishes evolved skeletons made of hard calcified tissue. That's our true bone. And then we have ray fin fishes that are aquatic vertebrates with skeletons of true bone. Most have paired fins. It says fins, but it should say fins. I cut and pasted that. Scales and gills. So when you think of ray fin fishes, this is what you're thinking of most of the time. But then you have lobe finned fishes, and these you probably don't think of as much. So these guys are still bony fishes, but they have these fleshy fins, and they have like more bones in them. These are the guys that kind of like they kind of can like walk up on the mud sometimes. This is how you're starting to evolve into more land animal type, amphibian type creatures. But they have these kind of lobes, for lack of a better word. They aren't these pretty rays that we're used to seeing. And we'll talk more about them next week, like I said. So then amphibians, these are like the most adorable frogs on a stick ever. So our amphibians, so the word amphibian means double life because they live sometime in the water at some point, and then they live on land. So their larval stage or the eggs are in water, and then they're on land. Do you remember what I told you about frog eggs, how to tell if they've been fertilized or not? If you see a pond full of frog eggs and the little black dot in the center is facing straight up at the sky, they've been fertilized. If they're just kind of looking all different directions, they haven't been fertilized yet. So if you want to like have a tank or something and observe a little tadpole hatch and whatever, you want to get the ones with the little, and you can watch it happen. So we did a lot of experiments in like embryology studies with these eggs because they develop outside, right? There's no internal fertilization, so you can really see them. So I'll tell you this is kind of weird and cool at the same time. So if you ever want to know how they do this in a science lab at like a college level, they'll have the specific frogs we use were called Raina pippins. They're kind of little and they're kind of green and speckled, and they're about yay big. So you can get the female frogs to produce eggs. You can give them certain hormones or whatever, just when they're at that stage. And if you fold their legs up beside them, like literally fold it up and hold them like this, you can squeeze down and this just string of jelly-like eggs will just come popping out of them. They just squeeze it out like jelly. You can do it a couple times. You can get a couple different female frogs and do that. And then for the males, they have to be killed because you can't get the sperm out of them otherwise. So they'll take the males, they'll kill the males, and then they will find their testes, put them in a little petri dish and chop them up into a million little pieces. And then they take that liquid and they'll squirt it all over the top of the eggs, and you can watch them go whoop, whoop, whoop as they turn up. It's really wild. They'll just all suddenly start facing upward. And then if you're going to work with them, you need to be able to separate them because they're in that jelly. So you can put a solution in that's a de-jellying solution, and you just kind of swirl it around, and then they all become little separate eggs. And then you can take one or two or however many you need for your lab team or your personal use and do whatever you want with them. But I tell you what, the first time I saw my professor go and squeeze eggs out of a frog, I was like, whoa. I mean, it's like toothpaste, but it's kind of amazing. It really, really is. And then we're all like, wait a minute, how'd you get the sperm? Oh, well, so we had to kill him. Yep. So several fossils indicate various lines of these lobe-finned fish evolved sturdier appendages and resemble the limbs of tetrapods. Now, tetrapods are anything with 4 limbs. So you're a tetrapod. You're just bipedal. These guys are tetrapods. So these lobe-finned fish are what we believe sort of evolved into modern day amphibians. So early amphibians evolved ways to breathe air and protect themselves from drying out. So a lot of these guys have like kind of a slimier skin, and some of them have like almost a waxier skin. And like toads in particular, if you've ever touched toads, I'm sure you have, they have more of a rougher skin, right? They're not so slimy, they're kind of rough. So they've got a way to keep things dry. This gecko was adorable and I had to put him in here. So here's a reptile. I'm sorry, but he's too cute. Look at this. He is actually smiling. I mean, he's so cute. Look at that dude.
Enjoying
So
life.
he's just so cute. So anyway, reptiles evolved from amphibians. And, huh?
Do they have goat pupils?
I don't know, man. It kind of looks like he does, right? These up and down ones. That goat got devil eyes. Yeah, I know. So they were the first vertebrates to evolve to have adaptations for drier conditions. So your fish have to be in the water all the time. They can't even breathe out of water. But amphibians can breathe out of water once they've reached their adult mature phase, right? As larvae, they're not, tadpoles aren't going to do that, but adult amphibians will. And then you get to these reptiles. But amphibians are still putting their eggs in water. Reptiles are not. Amphibians are. So what's the difference between a reptile egg and an amphibian egg?
It's hard.
They have a shell, right? And it's kind of like, describe what a reptile shell is like.
Paper.
It's kind of leathery. They're soft, leathery. They're not like a chicken egg. They're leathery. So they haven't quite gotten them to that point. And they tend to bury them, right? They tend to keep them someplace kind of moist. If you've ever noticed, like turtles will bury their eggs. Sometimes lizards will bury their eggs, whereas birds will put them in a nest and sit on them all the time. And I've noticed my mating pair of bluebirds is starting to come back and check out my house. So we're going to have to keep an eye on them because they typically have 2 broods a year. And it's pretty cool to watch because I have a little endoscopic camera I can put in there and you can watch the babies hatch. You can watch them eat. It's pretty darn cool. So you got dinosaurs that lived in the Triassic period and the Jurassic period all over the world. Obviously, we found fossils everywhere. 66 million years ago, worldwide mass extinction occurred. At the end of the Cretaceous period, what do we think caused that? Yeah.
Giant rock from outer space.
Yeah. So a lot of them didn't make it. Some of them did, obviously. So then we get to birds. What's this guy?
Peacock.
What do you call the female?
Peacock.
Peahen. Yeah, it's kind of hard because you want to, oh, it's a female peacock, because peacock is all I ever say, but it's a peahen. Anybody ever heard the noise they make?
No.
It's god awful. For such a beautiful creature, they make this, it's terrible. I stayed at a resort once in Jamaica, the only time I've ever been to Jamaica, and peacocks and peahens just wandered about. They just went everywhere. And they were so pretty. And then they'd start squawking. And it sounds like, it reminded me of, if anybody plays a woodwind instrument, if you take that mouthpiece off the instrument and then just blow it, it makes a terrible noise. That's what they sound like. It's so sad. So birds are reptiles that regulate their internal body temperature. That's pretty much your main difference. Now we've gone from being an ectotherm to what? An endotherm. Birds are endotherms, right? When you touch them, they're nice and warm, right? And reptiles are obviously ectotherms. They can deal with whatever temperature. But if you've noticed, they will slow down a lot. So that's how we got the anole, the little green anole. My mom saw it in the basement and she thought it was dead because it was not moving. So she took the little dustpan and the foxtail and went to sweep it and it started to move. And she was like, ooh. So she brought it upstairs, squished under the broom. And she said, if I put him outside, is he going to freeze? And I was like, he'll find a place to go where he won't freeze. Well, why don't I hang on to him for a little bit so my kids can take a look at him? So he's over there. He's a little green anole. Now they do change color. Not quite as brilliantly as a chameleon, but they'll go from like blackish brown to green. They'll kind of fade in and out. And they have dewlaps. If you've ever seen them, it's like a big fan of skin that goes right here. And it tends to be a different color. There's this pink. And they'll puff it out when they want to attract a mate or when they're ticked off at somebody. And they'll bob their heads. It's got this big thing. So I was looking for, they're insectivores. So I was looking for food for him. And you know, at the bottom of the downspout, there's that concrete piece that kind of shapes like this. So I picked it up looking for food for him, thinking maybe there's some little bugs under there. And I found a little brown snake. I was like, oh, well, you can come too. So I stuck him in the little box. So there's a little brown snake and the little brown snakes we have around here. They're about this long. They're called Decay's brown snakes. They only get about this big. They're maybe as wide as a pencil, completely harmless. They can't hurt you at all. They have little beady black eyes. Their faces are cute. They can't hurt you, but they eat snails and things like that. They don't have teeth. So we've got 2 of them over there you can look at, along with our ants that are starting to do stuff. They made some tunnels. So recent fossil discoveries strongly support the hypothesis that birds evolved from a certain group of dinosaurs. And then we call this class Aves. And then from a clade, within a clade, it starts to get really involved. But Aves in general are birds. So then we have our mammals. Oh, who's that?
A sloth.
Oh my goodness. That is the cutest little sloth. I just want to scritch his little chin, but you might not like that. It probably would take him a long time to get around to biting me though, because they're very slow. So characteristics unique to mammals include mammary glands in females, and that's how you get the word mammal, right? Nourish their young with milk. And they breathe air. They have 4-chambered hearts. You have a 4-chambered heart too. They regulate their internal body temperature. And after birth, most placental mammals care for their young and nurse them and provide nourishment. Now, Placental mammals are ones that obviously have a placenta. We have a whole group of mammals that don't have a placenta. Do you know what those are? Those are the monotremes. So those are things like your echidnas, your platypus, things of that sort. So some of these guys just straight up lay eggs, which is weird. Like a platypus will lay an egg, right? But then it hatches and then it feeds milk. Now, platypus doesn't have nipples or teats or anything like that. They just sort of almost like they sweat milk right onto their skin. And mammary glands are actually adapted sweat glands. Like that's where they came from. So it makes sense when you look at these sort of mixture animals like a platypus, and they've got this milk oozing out of the underside of their body with no real nipple or anything. Whereas like if you get to say a kangaroo doesn't lay an egg, obviously, but it delivers a very, very immature little Joey. Like baby kangaroos when they're born are like this big and they're completely useless and harmless, and they don't grow to any kind of maturity within their mom. Instead, they make this ridiculously long crawl up to the pouch, which is like a torturous event. And then they pop onto one of the teats in the pouch and they don't come off. They literally get locked on, like it swells up in their little mouth and they can't get off. And then they just stay there and just suck milk until they grow big enough to pop off. Isn't that kind of a weird thought? Like that's not, and also I'm telling you, marsupial reproductive systems are wild. They're wild. They have things like two uteri, like a branching vagina, and the males tend to have bifurcated penises that can go both ways. It's really crazy and it's fascinating. But placental mammals are probably what you're more familiar with. So that's most of the mammals that you see, pretty much everything in North America, except what's our marsupial here? Possum, right? So primate evolution. Oh, he's so
Why does
cute.
it look like that is never going to close its eyes or get any
It's my uncle.
I think that's a slow loris.
and, like,
Anyway,
it's just constantly on caffeine.
there's video of a lady, I think it's a lady, feeding a slow loris a ball of rice, and it's under a box, and she like lifts up the box and has it sticks its little hand out and takes it. But they're very slow because they're called slow loris. But they actually produce a toxic chemical, and then they rub it under their armpits and stuff so that they can actually make people or whatever predators sick. It's weird little dudes. They're so cute. So what's a primate? Oh, what's this guy? You know what he is.
Yeah.
As a meerkat. Oh yeah, they're fun to watch, man. My favorite meerkat video is one of a preacher. It's a preacher, and he's preaching this long sermon. And it's a voiceover, and the meerkat's sleeping. He's like waking up and falling asleep, and it looks just like he's listening to this really long, boring sermon. So primates include things like lemurs, monkeys, apes, and they share several adaptations for a life often spent in the trees. So we call these arboreal, right? Because they live in trees. Now we don't live in trees, but they do. Now, if you ever go to Holland and you go to Amsterdam, they have a super cool zoo with lemurs, and they let you in this space with the lemurs, the red lemurs and stuff. Like they close the gate and you go in and they're everywhere, and they sit on the fence. And I was actually touching one until they told me not to touch it, but it's really cool how close you can get to them, because we don't have zoos like that here. Like we don't get to touch, they don't do that. But apparently in Amsterdam. So in general, a primate is a mammal that has relatively long fingers and toes instead of nails and claws, arms that can rotate around shoulders, and strong clavicle, binocular vision, and well-developed cerebrum. What's your cerebrum?
Brain.
Yeah, and what part of your brain is it?
The front.
It's this whole big part that has the two lobes, right? It's not any of the little stuff in the back. And it's the part that allows for thinking, right? And then your frontal lobe and your occipital lobe, they all do different things.
What is clavicle mean?
Clavicle, this is your clavicle, your collarbone. Yep. Which would be important if you were swinging from trees. So this is really cool. This is a gorilla. No. A bonobo, I believe. And a human. And look at those hands. That's pretty cool. So primates typically have 5 flexible fingers and toes. Each hand or foot that that on each hand or foot that can curl, grip objects firmly and precisely. So the thumb is a super important thing, right? Only primates have this thumb, and only ours is developed as much to do all kinds of things. But this allows you to do this. If you're an animal, you can only do this, like a bird, you're not gonna be hanging. But if you can do this, now you can hang from the branch. There's all kinds of things you can do. So those opposable thumbs are super important. So it enables primates to run along tree limbs and swing from branch to branch. You can't swing. Have you ever seen a squirrel swing? No, because their feet do this, right? They don't have this, so they can't swing. They can jump. That's crazy. So in addition, most primates have thumbs and big toes that can move against the other digits. Can you move your big toes separately from the rest of your toes? Yep. Anybody have pincher toes? You pick up things off the floor? Uh-huh. Yeah, I had a cousin who was an expert at that. Something would drop, she'd pick it up with her foot. So if you try to move your other toes independently, it's not so easy, but to move your big toe independently isn't that hard at all.
I can move my pinky toes independently.
Oh, I cannot. This guy is super cool. He's a kind of lemur. He's a black lemur, but they have these blue eyes. I thought he was really neat, so I wanted to include it. So the other thing primates have is binocular vision. So that means you've got two eyes and they're both pointing this way. If you look at predators, this is where your eyes are going, right? If you look at prey, it tends to be here. Uh-huh.
It looks like he's about to shoot something out of his eyes.
He kind of does, yeah.
Still charging up.
So think about a rabbit. Where are rabbits' eyes? They're on the sides of their head. Now they can see this way in front of them, but they can also see if they're being hunted by something. We are trying to look this way because we are predators, right? And so are these other primates. So many primates have a broad face. So both eyes face forward with overlapping fields of view. So that's important. If you're a rabbit and you can see in front of you, what you don't see is this, right? Ours overlap. We've got an eye that does this and an eye that does this. And in the middle, you have an overlap. So that's why when you do like this, it's harder to tell depth perception. But when you do like this, you've got depth perception better. So that's super important, especially if you're hunting things. So also, the binocular vision is the ability to combine visual images from the eyes, which provides your depth perception, right? And a three-dimensional view of the world. So if you don't have this binocular vision, you don't really have a three-dimensional view, which is hard to imagine. It's hard for us to imagine what that looks like to other animals because that's not how we see. So it's kind of a difficult thing to imagine, but it's super important. So it comes in handy for judging locations of tree branches. Oh yeah, if you only had one eye, you'd have a hard time jumping and you'd miss something, right? That's why some people that are blind in one eye, like some of them can drive fine and others, they haven't adapted as well and they can't because the depth perception isn't there. And that's important if you're not going to hit the car in front of you at a stoplight, that sort of thing. Most people can because they adapt, their brains will adapt, but still. So evolution of primates. This dude is too cute. It's so freaking cute. Okay. What's your closest genetic relative?
Chimpanzee.
Specifically what? Do we know? It's a bonobo. A bonobo. Yep. Super cute. So I feel like this lesson is the wrong lesson, but we're going to do it anyway. So humans and other primates evolved from a common ancestor that lived more than 65 million years ago. Primates in one of these groups look very much like typical monkeys. And then you have these guys, these tarsiers and anthropods. I'm gonna look at something real quick. I feel like this went out of the way. Was this stuff was what you were reading, right? You don't remember your reading, do you? It still says 215. I just want to make absolutely sure that I didn't put the wrong.
We talked more about evolution than.
Yeah, okay, then that's probably right. That's probably right. Oops. Hold on. Let me double sure. What's this one? This was last week, right? Last week we did. Open up. That's that, not this. Wrong one. I feel like you guys I feel like I'm looking at the wrong lesson. I'm like, I have so many of them in here. Nope, it's not plants, so that's not it. We did that.
I think we're on the right one.
think we are.
It started off right.
Yeah, it just feels weird to me. It feels like we've moved ahead and skipped over the mollusks and stuff, but I think they're here and they're just coming. We haven't gotten to them.
Mollusks are after this in our book.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, we're there. Okay, it just felt weird to me. I was like, I am hoping that I'm not going through this whole thing like, oh my goodness. Because we have a thing on mammals later. So, okay. So tarsiers in anthropoids. These are cute. Look at this guy. So these are human-like primates. These include monkeys, great apes, and humans. So this is the categories that we're going to fall into. So New World monkeys, there's New World apes and Old World apes, and it's kind of a delineation they've made as far as evolution. So New World monkeys have a long prehensile tail that can coil tightly enough around a branch to serve as like a fifth hand. You ever seen the monkeys that do that? I mean, that's exactly what they can hang from that tail. It's pretty crazy. And then your great apes, which include things like hominoids, gibbons, orangutans, gorillas, chimpanzees, and humans. So when you start reading, you'll see hominid and hominin. Okay, so this is it gets confusing. So this is sort of how they've differentiated it. And they just changed it recently, like in the last 2 years, they've kind of made a delineation. So your hominid is a group consisting of all modern and extinct great apes. So that is modern humans, chimpanzees, gorillas, orangutans, and all intermediate ancestors. And then hominin is a group consisting of modern humans, extinct species, and all other intermediate ancestors. So basically, hominid is this group, and then when you pull modern humans out, it becomes hominin. So it's like hominin should be under hominid, but in the past they were kind of interchangeable. So when you're reading stuff, you might see that they're confusing because they're using both terms. So for example, Australopithecus, Pananthropus, all these guys, these are going to fall under your hominin. All right, so this term hominid was used to have the same meaning as hominid, had the same meaning as hominin, now has. So therefore, a very useful term to designate the line leading to modern humans was used when referring to various numbers. Just remember that hominin fits into hominid, but if you're reading anything that's more than a few years old, it's going to be all backwards and screwy. It's going to get confusing. So hominid is now assigned to your broader meaning, refers to all your great apes, all your ancestors, and new terminology is being used in scientific journals, it says, but it's only a matter of time, possibly many years, before everyone catches up. So we're not there yet. So the problem for students and teachers is a lot of texts still use the old system, and many internet sites haven't caught up. Some of the ones I looked at for this stuff had not caught up. So even though some of them are reputable, they still haven't caught up. So students and teachers need to be aware that hominids can mean two different things depending on how up to date the reference material is. So just be aware of that cute little guy. Okay, so hominin evolutions. Now we're looking at hominin. Sometimes it has an E on it. That's another fun one too. So hominin fits into hominid. So we know that hominin is all the human ancestors specifically. Does anybody know who this is? That's Lucy. Yep. So Lucy is one of the first hominin examples that we have as far as fossils go. So hominins led to humans and include modern humans, other species more closely related to us, like chimpanzees, and they've got the larger brains. So this is how we're kind of separating them out. So since the 90s, new discoveries in Africa doubled the number of known hominin species. So hominin fossils date back 7 million years, 7 million years. Now, wherever we were looking at those first things today, 450 million, 530 million or something. Big difference. This is like barely a drop in the bucket, right? 7 million years. So are they ancestors or relatives? Okay, so this is a difference. So when you think about Neanderthals, they are not ancestors, really, they're relatives because we didn't evolve from them. They're a separate branch. And that gets confusing too. So you got all these various hypotheses on how these hominins are related to humans. All hominin species relate to modern humans, but not all our ancestors. Distinguishing relatives from ancestors in the hominin family is an ongoing challenge. They're still trying to work on this. So then you get these guys here. In 2002, paleontologists in Central Africa discovered a skull that was 7 million years old. And they called it, this is a hard one for me. Sahelanthropus? Yeah, Sahelanthropus. Scientists are still debating whether it represents a hominin. Not this long ago, we still don't know what we're doing. Now we have Australopithecus. That's Lucy, okay? So this type of hominin lived 4 million years to 1.5 million years ago. This is not that old. And Lucy is a female skeleton discovered in 1974, not that long ago. Lived 3.2 million years ago. In 2006, an Ethiopian researcher announced a discovery of some incredibly well-preserved 3.3 million year old fossil bones of a young female hominin. Now she is in New York in the Museum of Natural History, and you can go see her. This is, yeah, her skeleton. This is a representation of what she would have looked like based on her skeletal features, but they have her skeleton all set up and you can go in and look at her, and it's pretty darn cool. So this is how we think we get to modern humans. You got your chimpanzees going over here, woo! And then if you look right around here, this is our Australopithecus. So here's where our Lucy is. She's over in this area. And then you've got these dudes that branch off here, some dude here, some other dude here, some other dude here. And then like, look here, this guy, Homo erectus, he's a relative and he's an ancestor because we came from him. But the Neanderthal is a relative and not an ancestor because we didn't come from him. We branched off over here. And obviously they were not as successful as Homo sapiens. So Homo sapiens were more successful than Neanderthals, and that's why they are gone. But there was a time when these two lived together. And there's some really cool documentaries where you can see like Neanderthals interacting or fighting with Homo sapiens. It's kind of cool because they did live during the same time period for a while. So hominins lived billions of years before modern humans. Many species of our genus existed before our species. So Homo sapiens appeared. Furthermore, at least 3 other Homo species existed at the same time as early humans. So I think Homo erectus was there for a little bit too, not too terribly long. So now we go and we look at, we've gone from sponges to cnidarians and to worms. So now where do we go today? That is a cool worm, right? That is awesome. So then we go to mollusks and arthropods. So here is today's stuff. Have you seen these? Do you know what these are?
No.
So they call these blue dragons. It's a what? It looks like a kite. It's an actual mollusk, and they aren't here in our part of the world, but I've seen videos of people who've caught them, and they're only about the size of your hand, maybe a little smaller. But that thing's gorgeous. Isn't it pretty? Are they what? I don't think so.
All pretty.
They're not, yeah, they're about, but they're gorgeous. So that's what their faces look like. They're so cute. So anyway, yeah, when it comes to mollusks, as you learned today, bilateral symmetry, right? Tripoblastic, which was what, 3 layers?
Yeah, mesoderm, ectoderm, and
Yep, exactly. Organ systems with some grade of organization. Body is soft and unsegmented. So they have regions, but it's not segmented like an arthropod, for example. So they've got their 3 regions, their head, this visceral mass, and like a foot usually. And some of them have, like the cephalopods have an adapted foot that's changed. That would be, like you saw today, the legs and the tentacles. So if you looked at a snail, its foot's really obvious, right? It's that thing that's inching along. But if you look at a cephalopod like today, they have this modified foot. So they can be found everywhere, aquatic, terrestrial, right? So they have a body cavity that kind of circulates their blood. Some of them have the little hearts like we saw today, but they're not real. They're not like amphibian or bird or mammal hearts the way we think of them, because we have a closed circulatory system. Theirs is open. It kind of just floats stuff around in there. They do have some level of digestive system. What did you see today in your squid?
A lot of things.
Digestive system wise, what'd you?
a mouth, the bowl, what was it called?
Yeah. And yeah, and some esophagus, right? So there was some stuff going on, right? And let's see. And then they have that radula. Remember the little tongue-like thing? So Their nervous system is made up of paired ganglia. Okay, so ganglia are not really, it's not really a brain. Ganglia is like a big mass of neurons and nerve tissue. It's sort of, yeah, but then they branch. So when you get a little more involved and you look at arthropods, for example, I have a slide I'll bring down that's it's crayfish neurons. Crayfish have like a cord that runs down the back side of them, and it's just a nerve cord, but it's not like a chordate cord, it's just a nerve cord, and it has these little paired ganglions. So on the way down, there's like a little bunch here and then branches off, and a little bunch here and it branches off. So that's kind of how they function. And these guys are a little similar in that they do have little paired ganglia. So they have they're little balls of stuff. I had one of my friends did a whole research on crayfish nervous system. She was in there making slides with crayfish nerves all the time. So they have this radula, which if you've ever seen a snail eat, and I have some great videos of the snails we had several years ago eating, but it's like a little tongue and it's kind of grippy and sharp and they can grab stuff with it. It's pretty cool. And let's see, they have gills a lot of the time. They have the foot or some kind of modified foot. They do tend to have kidneys, and their sexes are separate or unisexual, they'll say in some cases. And reproduction is sexual, and fertilization can be internal or external. Depends on what you're dealing with. So here's your classes of mollusks. Gastropods. All right. Gastropods are your snails and your slugs. They have 4 body parts, not really segments, but they have a head, a mantle, and a foot, and then this kind of mass in the middle. Sometimes they call it like a visceral mass or whatever. And that's where their organs tend to be. Like in a snail, they're up inside the shell. In a slug, they're just kind of hanging out in their body. And then they have their little radulas too. And they can be carnivorous or herbivorous. If you watch, I'll have to find the videos for you, but I got some great videos of the snails we had a couple of years ago. Got some really up close ones of them, like eating the little leaves and stuff that I'd put in there, eating little flowers off of stuff. And it's really, they eat real slow, but their little radula comes out and they pick at stuff. And that muscular foot, I got a great video too of one crawling along the side of the tank. Now these were big snails. They were like this big. And I've got one for all the students. Yeah, I got one. They actually are the kind that people eat, but I got them from some eBay guy that would give me snails. And then it turned out they were coming from Ukraine. And I thought, oh my gosh, I'm importing snails from Ukraine. I'm sure this is not legal. And I was terrified for about 3 weeks till they arrived. And then they were fine. Nobody, customs did not come after me.
The FBI are listening
right
now.
So these are all examples of gastropods. Here's a little close up of a snail face. I think they're adorable. And this is a really cool sea slug. Like that thing is neat. Some kind of a, well, I don't know if it's technically a sea slug, some kind of gastropod. Is it what?
Infrared? Is that what it is?
I don't know, but it's really pretty. And this guy too.
What's the word for it? Is it infrared?
Ultraviolet? What did you say?
I don't know, like the heat signature.
Oh.
That would be infrared, yeah.
Infrared.
Oh, that's what it looks like, you're saying.
Yes,
Oh yeah, it does.
Sorry, I
The
didn't
colors.
know.
No, I know what you mean. Yeah. So then you have bivalvia. So this is easy to remember. Bi meaning 2, right? And then they call this a valve. They're hinged. They have a shell, right? So these are the delicious guys like oysters, and I love them. Oysters and clams and mussels. I mean, things like that. If anybody ever tried to open a raw oyster, it is not easy. They are super muscular and they don't want, yeah, if you've ever tried to open a raw oyster shell, they do not want to open. So yeah, but they're good. I think so. So anyway, they have this external super hard shell and it covers their little soft body. Now, clams you don't usually see coming out, but that's what they look like when they come out. Kind of odd and unattractive.
Have you ever seen one move around?
Yeah, it's weird. It's really weird. Yeah, but this is what they look like when they poke their little selves out of their shell and go looking for food. Now, here is an oyster that's made of pearl. Do you know how that happens?
It like traps food or dirt or something. Right?
Yeah, usually sand or some kind of irritant. If you look closely at the inside of this shell, it's kind of hard to see because they left the oyster itself here. But if you've ever seen the inside of an oyster shell or almost any shell, there's this beautiful white iridescent sort of, it's a hard surface, but it's beautiful and white and iridescent. So they call that mother of pearl. And sometimes they'll put it in furniture or musical instruments or make jewelry out of it because it's very pretty. But that's what makes the pearl, which is why it's called mother of pearl. So if you get a bit of sand or something inside their bodies, they get super irritated by that. So they start producing the mother of pearl and surrounding it so that it gets less and less irritating. Now it's smooth, right? Now it's not bothering them, but they just keep producing it and the pearl gets bigger and bigger. So for cultured pearls, what they do is they have farms full of oysters and they send divers in or whatever, and they pull them out, they force them open and they jam have a little tool, they poke inside of their little body and they stick a little, like a plastic bead in it, and that will force them to make a pearl out of it. So cultured pearls are done that way, whereas natural pearls are actually done like in the ocean on their own. And then the freshwater pearls tend to be kind of bumpy looking, they're different, whereas natural pearls from saltwater pearls are nice and round, and it's really pretty. So that's how they do it. And then we have cephalopoda. I love these guys because they're just so cool. So this is your octopus or octopuses or octopi, both are right, and your squid. So these guys are exclusively marine, and they're characterized by bilateral symmetry, a really prominent head, and a set of arms or tentacles, which are modified from the foot, right? So most of them do have a radula still, and they swim by jet propulsion. And they are the most complex invertebrate nervous system. Has anybody watched My Octopus Teacher on Netflix? It's worth watching. It's not very long. I think it's a couple episodes maybe, or maybe it's one solid episode. I don't know, but I remember it didn't take me long to watch it. But it's a guy who goes swimming every day, snorkeling every day, and he came upon an octopus and he kind of befriended it. But he got to watch all the things that it did, and it was fascinating. Like, he enjoyed it. And then this is what you guys had today, was a squid, sorry, squishy squid. Yeah, obviously this is an octopus. It was squishy. What's this guy here? Do we know who he is? Is a nautilus. Yeah. So this is a cephalopod that actually has a shell. It's a nautilus. And what's this one? Cuttlefish. I freaking love cuttlefish. They are great at changing color. If you have seen a bird cage and in it, there's this white oval shaped thing that looks almost like chalk, and the birds pick at it, that's actually from the cuttlefish. That's their internal, like, calcified structure. They'll take those out and they'll put them in there for the birds to kind of peck at. So now we look at our arthropods. Aren't they pretty? So, it's some kind of a mantis.
That's a pink praying
Mhm.
mantis.
And he's pink. What is he? Do you know what he is? An orchard. He's really pretty. I like him. And the butterfly. All right, so our arthropods. Tripoblastic. Again, that means they have 3 layers. Segmented. Well, here you can see it. A head right here, a thorax, and an abdomen. So they have an organ system with some level of organization. They have their head, thorax, abdomen, jointed appendages. See all the little joints? You can move those legs different ways. And they have a coelomic cavity filled with blood, open circulatory system still.
Oh, so the cavity is just filled with blood.
Yes, pretty much. That's why when you squash them,
Come on.
yeah, gross, right? Yeah, and so they have compound eyes. What are compound eyes?
Lots of eye in one.
Yeah, basically, if you ever look at a fly up close, they have these big eyes, but they're really made of many, many, many small eyes, which is why it's so hard to kill them or swat them, because they can see you coming from behind and from the side. They can see almost everywhere because the way those eyes are organized. And whoops, something above. So they have this exoskeleton made of chitin. Do you remember what else is made of chitin?
Is that shrooms?
Mushrooms. Yeah, that's the structure that makes mushrooms. It's not cellulose in mushrooms, it's chitin. And it's also, oddly enough, in arthropods. So they've got, some are terrestrial, and they breathe through little tubules in their exoskeleton. And the aquatic ones can't, I'm not bumping that. I don't know why it's doing that. I didn't touch you. I really didn't. I was just moving. So the aquatic ones can excrete through these green glands or coaxial glands. There's all this gross stuff going on. Squeak, squish, squish. So unisexual fertilization is either internal or external, well-developed digestive system. You ever had to devein a shrimp? Yeah. So if you cut a shrimp open, you usually cut it down the back, and then there's this like black tube running through it, and that's usually their digestive system and whatever's in it. And you take that out. They call it deveining, but it's not a vein, it's their digestive tract. And let's see what else. They tend to breathe through their exoskeleton. They have little holes in it, and then they have sensory organs. They have things like hair, antenna, compound eyes or simple eyes. Sometimes they have auditory organs. They can hear stuff. And statocysts, which is another, just kind of tells you what you're touching. So then we have our subphyla. So we can't go straight to class. We can't go from kingdom, phylum, class. We got to go to subphylum because there's so many. So these dudes here, these are your spiders, scorpions, harvestmen, mites, and ticks. Okay, what are harvestmen? That's the one that's not obvious. Daddy long legs. Daddy long legs is a harvestman. Is it a spider? No. Is it an arachnid? Yes, but it is not a spider. So daddy long legs, people, oh, guys, a big spider. It's not a spider, it's a harvestman. So they have 6 pairs of jointed appendages. 6 pairs is 12. We always think they have 8 legs, right? Well, they do, because 4 of those pairs are on their thorax. Those are the 8 legs we see. The other 2 pairs are at their mouth, and these tend to be the little, we see those little grippy looking things up there that start to make, yeah, they have those little guys like this in front. Those are their other appendages. And some of them are very specialized. Obviously, some go in the front. Like, see this guy right here? Does anybody know what he is, by the way? Look at his 4 eyes. He's a peacock spider. And he's one of those dudes, he will lift up that abdomen and wave his butt at whatever girl he is interested in, and he will dance all around and show his little fancy butt. Look at me, I'm a peacock spider. That's what they do.
Kind of looks like one of those paper dragons.
Yeah, they're gorgeous. They're really gorgeous. So next would be, okay, now you won't click when before you clicked. Okay, don't be stupid. What the boogie? Hello. Okay, there we go. No, I got it. I'm good. Go away. Hexapoda. All right, these are our. No, we are not going to do that. Okay, hexapoda. So these are our insects. When you think of insects, it's hexapoda you're thinking of. So they have 1 pair of antennae, 1 pair of mandibles, 1 pair of maxillae. So this is up at their mouth, right? And then the antennae are up here. They have this hypopharynx, which resembles a tongue. You ever seen a mosquito stick out that thing they eat with? Or even flies will do it too. They stick out that little tubey looking thing when they eat. That's what that is. So they have structures on the floor of their mouth, 3 pairs of jointed appendages. So how many legs do you see on their thorax? 6. Did you? Oh, yeah, 6. Okay. As opposed to arachnids, which had 8. Right. So they also have this thing called a gonopore on their posterior part of their abdomen. So this is like their kind of urogenital system all combined into one. And a lot of these guys have wings. Now, even within a species, you can have wings and no wings. So if you take a close look at the ants that we have in our ant farm, you'll find that there's one in there with wings. Now that one in there with wings is not really a queen, but she is, from what I read, because I'm like, why do I have one with wings in here? She's a sexually immature ant that if she flew off and found some other group and made her own colony, she might become a queen, but this group isn't going to do that. And I'm not quite sure I understand the social aspect of that and why, but I'm watching them to see what they do. She's the only one that has wings, but she is the same species as the rest. Crustacea. Okay. Obviously these are crabs, right? Crabs, lobsters, crayfish, shrimp, krill, prawn. So all these kinds of guys, barnacles. Okay. There is a terrestrial crustacean that I guarantee you all know. I guarantee you know it, but you probably don't recognize it. Oh, no, terrestrial. You've probably played with them. Roly-polies, right? Pill bugs. Those are crustaceans. They're not insects. So that's a terrestrial crustacean. And they're really cool. I love them. So they're neat, right?
How many muscles do they have?
I don't know. Yeah, I mean, it is. Some of them are almost purple and a lot of them are gray. I've seen them that are get bright purple and I'm not even sure why. It's probably has to do with whatever they're eating or whatnot. Yeah, they might be. So they have 2 pairs of antennae. They have gills. If you've ever opened up a crab, anybody ever picked their own crab? You guys are landlocked people. See, grew up at the beach. So yeah, I've grown up at the beach. I know me how to do some crabs, let me tell you. So anyway, they have gills inside. They're really obvious when you look at them. And yeah, and they have all these different jointed appendages. So look at this crab. These jointed appendages up front, these have the pinchers, the big pinchers, right? Yeah. This is a blue crab. These are freaking delicious. They're so delicious. Now they're red when you cook them. Yeah, those are the pincher things. These aren't really pinchers at all. And these are for swimming.
They look like they're boxing.
Like yeah, they're flat. They're actually very flat. They're like little flippers.
They're like
So they are mostly aquatic. Some of them do have appendages that are specific for mating. like grabbing a hold of their mate and hanging on. You can tell the gender of a shark, by the way. Next time you're at the aquarium and you're looking at sharks, male sharks have these things called claspers on their undersides. Like you can kind of look at them and see where their external urogenital system is fixated on the bottom of them towards their tail, right on their ventral side. But the males have these extra long, like appendages on either side of it. They're long and they're thin and they look kind of like, I don't know, big thumbs maybe. And the whole point of that is if they get a hold of a female shark, they can literally clasp her and she can't go anywhere. So that's what those are. So if you look at the sharks swimming by and you see one with these big things hanging off, that's a boy. They're easy to tell. These guys are easy to tell too, because if you flip over a blue crab, there's a piece on the bottom of them that hinges up and you have to kind of pop it off to be able to get their shell open. And the one on females is really kind of wide. It's like that, where the one on males is really narrow and then it opens at the bottom. So when you eat crabs, by the way, you eat the jimmies. Those are the boys, because the females are full of eggs and they're not delicious unless you're making soup. That's what they're for. So these guys, Myriapoda. Okay.
What?
Myriapoda. If I said I had a myriad of chores to do in a day, what would that mean? Okay, so Myriapoda would mean
A lot of feet.
a lot of feet.
So feet.
Millipedes and centipedes. Okay, how do you tell millipedes from centipedes? I'm going to tell you. So they got lots of jointed appendages, but they really only have two body sections. They have a head and a trunk. They tend to have simple eyes, a pair of antennae. Okay, they have mandibles, which is a lower jaw and an upper jaw. And they have respiratory exchange through their tracheal system. Now, these dudes here, you can tell them apart because it has to do with how many legs come off of each segment. I think centipedes have one pair of legs off a segment, and millipedes have two pairs of legs off a segment. So that's how you can tell them apart. So this is a gorgeous mantis. Yeah, it's some kind of flower mantis, orchid mantis or something. That thing is fabulous.
He's got fake eyes.
I know, he does have
Scare
big
away
eyes to
predators.
scare away people. Look at that thing though. I mean, it's stunning, stunning creature. So insects,
One or two. Is
What?
that like a wing?
yeah, it's wings and another wing here.
Oh, so it is two wings. Okay.
But yeah, like an outer and an inner set. A lot of insects have that.
When I see one with wings, I know.
Uh-huh.
Do they know have wings?
Yeah, they usually do, but they're usually kind of, they don't do much with them. So insect ecology is a study of how insects individually or as a community interact with surrounding environment or ecosystem. So I want you to think back to the slide way back when in the fall, when we had this little beaver standing on some stairs under a big stone arch. What was that about? Keystones. See, I knew if I made it weird, you all would not forget it. Okay, so sticking a beaver suddenly in the screen made it weird. So insects are going to be keystone species. Okay, so keep that in mind. All of them, pretty much. So they comprise over 80% of the terrestrial species on Earth. 80% of the animals that live on land are insects.
Yeah.
And they derive production of essential seeds, fruits, vegetables by pollination. They're decomposers. Now, we had an issue several years ago. It's still kind of an issue, but it's not as bad. Colony collapse disorder, where we had basically it was some kind of pathogen that bees were passing from one to another, an illness, and it would get into a colony and the hive would collapse. And that's a real problem because if we don't have enough bees, we don't have food. We need them. We don't have bees. We don't have apples. We don't have tomatoes. I mean, that's the that's how we eat. They do their job and we get fruit, right?
Like in the beaver.
Yeah. And then if we're not eating,
So good.
the animals that we eat are also not eating. So chicken, beef, pork, it's essential that these guys do their job. So that's why if you find a beehive like at your house in an unsafe place, like in your house, you don't spray it. You call a beekeeper or a bee mover, and they will come in and safely move that colony elsewhere so that you don't kill them all. And like we used to have a cedar pergola out there and it was full of carpenter bees. And I didn't want to use a pesticide because whatever kills carpenter bees also kills honeybees. So that's a real issue. So I ended up trying some natural things and that didn't work. And then we just took it down because there were so many, it was bad. They were going to make it fall. So as we're saying, they are keystone species. It's essential that we have them. Insects form the base of a complex ecological food web and of complex ecological food webs. In agriculture, natural and urban areas, they shape the appearance of the landscape. Think about it. If you didn't have them insects, there would be a huge problem. My thing is mosquitoes. I would gladly get rid of all the mosquitoes on the planet, but I really like bats. I think they're adorable, and bats eat mosquitoes. So what am I to do? I have to deal with them. No, but they eat a lot of stuff, but they really love mosquitoes.
10% of their body weight every night.
They do. And if you ever watch them dive and eat mosquitoes, it's amazing. They'll dive and just like,
I was
Yeah.
a bat come out the roof of my grandma's house
Mhm.
and just make a straight dive, and it was like real
Mhm.
close to my face.
Yep.
It was like the coolest thing.
So last year, it was during actually the year before, I guess. It was during COVID lockdown. Drew and my mom took the dogs for a walk in the woods down by the river. And they found a bat on the ground. It was a little red bat, Eastern red bat. So no, well, they scooped it up. Ozzy had a treat bag, and they scooped it up into the treat bag, and they brought it home for me. And
No, it smells like Ozzy's treats.
yeah, it did. But it was so cute. So I hung on to it for a little bit.
So you didn't feed it to Ollie.
No, because I was trying to figure out what was wrong with it, because it clearly wasn't able to fly. And I've never had a bat before to have any experience with a bat. So I ended up talking to some bat people at the Department of Natural Resources or something. And they said that if a bat hits the ground like that, it has a lot of trouble getting up and flying, because they can't just fly like a bird. So they said, take a broom, put it on the bristles of the broom, put it up on a tree pretty high, let it get on the tree and leave it there, because in order for them to fly, they have to drop. So it has to drop, and as it drops, it senses gravity up, down, this way, and then poof, it flies. So we stuck it up on one of the trees out there and watched it. And then when dusk came, we went out and looked at it, it was gone. So it did exactly what it was supposed to do. It dropped and flew. But it was super cute little thing there. I got a good look at its little wings, and it was really neat. So at the same time, insects are significant pests, right? We have real issues with insects with crops. So now they can make crops with genetic engineering that the insects won't eat. That's a good thing. But they also need to eat. We just don't want them to eat what we are trying to eat ourselves. Like it's a balance. It's a balancing act. So they can spread disease and endanger human, plant, and animal health. Okay, what is an insect that can spread disease? Mosquitoes. Yep. What else? Fleas. Yep. What else? Ticks. What's the common denominator with all those?
Malaria.
Yeah, but what's the common? How do fleas, mosquitoes, and ticks feed? Blood. They all eat blood meals, right? So then they pass things from one person to, what are fleas responsible for?
Black plague.
Yep, there you go. Everybody thought it was the rats. It wasn't the rats, it was the fleas on the rats.
Yeah.
Yep.
And the rats also got infected and then spread it to fleas that spread it to humans.
Exactly.
Spread it to fleas that spread
Yep.
it to rats and other humans. And then they'll spread it to more fleas to spread it to more.
Now, when I was a kid, anybody who had dogs or cats had fleas. Okay, you walked into their house and fleas jumped on you. It was normal. It was a normal thing. You're laying on the rug, reading a book, and there's fleas on your legs. You're like, shoot. My grandparents, I remember once walking into their house, got up to the top of the stairs, looked down and went, and there were like 50 fleas all over my legs. It was normal stuff. Until they came out with that drip on the back of the neck business, nothing worked. You could dip, it was called dipping your dog. You put your dog in this like flea, you dipped your dog. No, for real, you dip them. My uncle was an exterminator. He would bomb houses, which meant everybody had to leave, and they'd put these things out in the house everywhere, turn them all on, and you could come back like 4 hours later when it had settled and killed the fleas. But it was absolutely normal to have fleas all over you all the time, and just fleas. My mother used to cut them in half with her fingernails. That way they would die. They were everywhere. I remember it vividly. But when they started that little drip, like he gets a little drip, sometimes people take him as pills. He has a little pill now, I think it is. No, we don't have fleas in houses anymore. And you guys have no idea. It's also like you guys don't know what it's like to walk into a house where everybody's smoking, because that was normal too. So yes, a couple years back at the Olympics, it was a real concern because they were in Rio. And do you remember what was heading in Brazil at that time? Zika. Zika was being transmitted by fleas. And yes, it was causing huge developmental abnormalities in babies that were in utero at the time if their mother got bitten. And these babies were born with these like small deformed heads and all this stuff. It was awful. So invasive insect species.
Oh, I see.
There's one up there. They've been in here. Yep.
I was just pointing out.
Yep.
Yeah, just like lost
Those are the
it.
ones. What are those?
Ladybugs.
Yep, but those aren't real ladybugs. Those are the ladybug imposters. And I've been watching them on purpose because I'm trying to catch them and feed them to my anole because I don't know if he'll eat them because they're not indigenous, but I'm curious because he does eat insects. So yeah, we got a couple of them in here about a month ago and they just keep coming back. All right.
There were only 2 rats.
Yep. See what I mean? They're everywhere.
Pointed jacks.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. So those are invasive.
Turn around.
What's the other one that's been getting in everybody's house this year that's invasive?
Oh, spiders.
Now, in the houses.
The spiders.
You got Duro spiders in your
Oh.
house?
No.
They were in the yard. How about those brown marmorated stink bugs that they got everywhere. The first year they came, oh, they're everywhere. We didn't have those before. Those are not indigenous. Those are
I haven't
invasive.
had them in the past 2 years.
Oh, we've had them. I found one just the other day in here. Here's the cool thing. Those Duro spiders, which are like probably our worst invasive species right now. Like you couldn't even walk outside this summer
That
without,
was crazy.
yeah, it was ridiculous. And their webs are crazy
giant.
strong,
My friend,
huge. Yeah.
my friend's cross country trail. It was like
Uh-huh.
it was like a
I am, yeah.
tint
Yep.
above.
I'm super curious to see what happens after winter, like how many come back. So,
Car at like dusk or sunrise.
Yep.
And the light would hit the power lines.
Yep, the
right
power
for
lines.
Miles. They would just
Yep.
Yeah.
here's the cool thing. They eat those stink bugs. Our indigenous species
No, don't
does
shoot
not.
them.
There is no bird or whatever around here that will eat those stink bugs. except those spiders.
It's a different one.
So they can cause ecosystem insects, obviously.
There's like a
And it can cause millions of deaths, things like malaria. All right, so moving on, because we only have a few minutes, Echinodermata. So these are these dudes we messed with today. Exclusively marine.
That's cute.
Yep, and they have bilateral symmetry at some point, sometimes a radial. Tripoblastic again, right? True coelom, uniquely shaped. It can be star shaped, it can be elongated or
Is tri-
spherical.
Is
Right?
triploblastic strictly for you, bro?
It has to do with how those regions of their body developed. So yes, it has to do with how they got there. So their body is covered with calcareous spicules. You guys saw this today, right?
Yeah.
These little dudes, which most of them have started to fall off.
Yeah.
When you get home tonight and do your scrubbing, they'll all come off. And even the guts inside of your little urchin will come out because they were in that bleach. You'll be able to just, yeah, a lot of them come out already. Yep. So they have water vascular systems, no real brain, but they have some nerves going on. And they respire through these little tube feet or gills, separate sexes. And lost parts can be regenerated. If you chop an arm off a sea star, it grows another arm. Our classes,
You pulled one off my hand.
Asteridia. So these are your sea stars. This is what you had today. They can have 5 or 40 arms, right? They're mobile. Then you have these guys. Okay, now these guys are like your sea stars. They're called brittle stars, but you see how their disc is at the center and it branches differently? That's how you tell what they are. Then you have pretty sand dollars, right? These guys are actually, they look hairy, but they have spicules on them. They're just very small. And by the time you see them like in a store, in a tourist shop, that's all gone and they're all white and pretty. And then these dudes stick to the bottom. They're pretty much sessile and they wave around and collect stuff. They look like little flowers. They're very pretty, but they call them sea lilies and feather stars, but they're not, they don't have these legs to scooch around and stuff like the others do. And then lastly, or sea cucumbers.
They
These are
keep their
fun.
Stomachs onto things.
These are cool. Yeah, they have this, they have a soft body rather than being calcareous.
I thought it's a sea star thing.
Well, they all kind of stuff in. All of these guys have like that sort of jellyfish type action where they squash all their food in and
Yeah.
squirt it back out. So they have these little branch tentacles and some of these guys are really pretty and some of them are really ugly, but they're very interesting. They have this single gonad. All right.
A bit like someone took a pickle, stabbed it a bunch
Yeah.
of times with pins.
This will be
and then
saved for
poured
you to
red
see.
dye on it.
Now I have some
That's
videos
great.
on these and I knew we weren't going to have time to watch them here. We might have time to watch one. maybe not, but I'm gonna put them in the email today and you'll see them, and you really should watch because there's like one in particular on this octopus and how they move around, how they get out of stuff, like how smart they are, because they are ridiculously smart. And yeah, there's that guy again. He's cute. And there are some on cuttlefish and how they change color, which is really amazing. Like they can match patterns, and they've done scientific. Here's the cool thing. And in this video, they show you this, but they put them on this checkerboard background and they can replicate the checkerboard on their skin. And then they put them on a background with circles and they can kind of replicate the circles, but then they do something where they put them on a background with circles that are incomplete. So it's like a line, but they're not connected. Now we look at that and go, that's a circle, because our minds do the connecting. They do that too. So the question is, how do their little brains do that connecting? That's really incredible, especially for such a kind of like a lower form. Like that's really cool. Jackie's like, oh my gosh, what's here? And I got one also about a really cool arthropod that has amazing camouflage and all that. So I'll put all those in the weekly email. So you want to look at them.
Yeah, that one.
Ah!
That's the one where it kind of got most of us getting jumped a bit.
The sea star.
All right, you guys, I'll catch you later.
The poor sea stars like,
You-
yep.
Yep.